Hello everyone, it's Brianna and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be giving you guys some Asian book recommendations. I'm really excited to share these books with you. I have split the recommendations into 3 categories. First, I have binge-worthy fun. Second, I have comfort reads. And third, I have the category which is just pain. I have 3 recommendations for each category and I really hope you guys enjoy the picks. Also, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. We'll hear more from them later. So for the category of binge-worthy fun, the first recommendation I have is I'll Be the One by Lyla Lee. I'll Be the One is a YA contemporary novel that follows our main character, Sky Shin. Sky's been told her whole life that fat girls can't dance, they can't perform, and they definitely can't become K-pop superstars. She decides to prove all of her haters wrong by joining a local K-pop competition show that's being held in Los Angeles, and she wants to win it all in both the dancing and singing categories. It is a super fun novel. There are some great characters that we meet along the way within the competition show, and I think the book also does a really good job with tackling fat shaming and fat phobia within K-pop and within Asian families as well. It is a really immersive read. It's also really easy to binge, hence why it's in this category. I think I read it within like 1 or 2 days. I picked it from my book club this month and it was just a great book. I highly recommend it for anyone who's a fan of K-pop or anyone who wants to see more plus-size representation in novels. And also the model for Sky Shin, who's on the novel, is also a huge K-pop fan, and I'll link her Instagram down below because she posts a lot of K-pop dance covers and it's really fun to watch. So definitely check out I'll Be the One if you're interested. It is a super fun read. The second book recommendation I have for binge-worthy fun is a Pho Love Story by Lyla Lee. This is another YA contemporary novel that follows our 2 main characters, Linh and Bao, Vietnamese teens who go to the same high school and whose families run competing pho restaurants. Because of this feud between their families, the 2 of them have never been able to build a lasting friendship, but one day when fate brings Linh and Bao together, the 2 of them realize that they actually have a lot more in common than they originally thought. As they grow closer, they have to balance their budding romance with the weight of their family's expectations, and as they start to really fall in love, they wonder why their families were feuding in the first place. This novel dives into a lot of issues of intergenerational trauma, of second-generation Vietnamese American life, and I think it's a really great picture of the Vietnamese diaspora experience, especially for people who are in their teens and early 20s like I am, and I really was happy to see myself represented in a young adult contemporary novel. If you also really like Vietnamese food, this novel talks about food so much that I was hungry the entire time I was reading it. So if you just want a fun book with great Vietnamese representation, Vietnamese diaspora representation I should say, definitely check out A Pho Love Story. The third and final binge-worthy fun book recommendation I have is Eva Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch by Julie Abe. This is a middle-grade fantasy novel that follows our main character, Eva. Eva is gearing up to take her novice witch test, and if she fails, she will lose all of her magic by age 13. This is super stressful for Eva because all of her life she's only been semi-magical. Whenever she tries to do any cool spell, she always falls asleep immediately afterwards and can't seem to summon the same amount of power that everybody else can. Once she gets sent to the town of Outry to start her witch test, she finds that the biggest magical storm in history is about to hit the village and destroy everything. She decides to set up a semi-magical repair shop in order to help the people, and she wants to prove to everyone once and for all that even a semi-magical witch can save the day. This book is really sweet. Eva is a wonderful main character to follow, and the cast of characters that surrounds her gives the best found family trope that I've seen in a long time in middle grade novels. I think this book is really easy to binge read, and it's also really fun on audiobook if you have access to that as well. So I highly recommend checking this out if you want to dive into a fun middle grade novel with really exciting eccentric characters and a really fun magic system. Alright, let's move on to comfort reads. So for comfort reads, the first book I wanted to recommend is The Girl and the Ghost by Hanna Alkaf. This is a middle grade fantasy novel that's based off of Malaysian folklore, and it also brought me to tears, so I highly recommend this one. It follows the story of our main character, Soraya, a young girl who for all of her life has been bullied, ostracized, and alienated at school, and her only friend is a Pelisit, or the ghost in the title, named Pink. This Pelisit is something that she inherited from her grandmother, and they have become the best of friends, completely inseparable. However, as Soraya grows a little bit older, she begins to discover that Pink actually has a dark side, and then once their relationship is threatened by outside forces, she has to band together with him to try to stop the darkness before it consumes the both of them. This is a beautiful story of family, of friendship, of love, and I know for a lot of my friends who are Malaysian, they said this was a great story of Malaysian culture and they love to see folklore like this represented in middle grade novels. So I can't recommend this enough. I really cried so much at the end of it, and I felt like the descriptions of the setting were so real. Hanna Alkaf is an amazing writer. I need to read her other books as well. And Soraya is just a delight as a main character. I feel like every time she felt anything, I also felt it with her. It was a super compelling novel, and 5 out of 5 stars. You guys have to read this one. The second comfort read I wanted to recommend to everyone is Love from A to Z by Lyla Lee. This is a YA contemporary romance that follows our two main characters, Zainab and Adam. Zainab gets suspended from school after she confronts her Islamophobic teacher about his prejudices, and her actions cause a few of her friends to get in trouble as well. She feels guilty about that, so she resolves to become a newer and nicer version of herself and starts to test out her new personality when she travels to Qatar early for spring break to visit her family. Once she arrives in Qatar, she meets this boy named Adam. Adam has recently been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and he's been keeping his diagnosis a secret from his father and his little sister because not so long ago they had lost their mother to the same illness. Both Zainab and Adam are putting on faces for the people around them, and the only way that they can really talk about what they truly feel is inside of their notebooks. That is until the two of them meet and find out that they have a lot in common. Love from A to Z is actually probably one of my favorite YA novels, if not my favorite YA contemporary novel. I love the characters so much. Zainab especially became one of my favorite characters in fiction of all time, and I think that what Lyla Lee does so well is developing family relationships. I cared so much for all of these side characters as well, or secondary characters as well. I loved seeing how much Zainab and Adam both grew as characters. The book also touches on a lot of important topics like Islamophobia in the US education system and chronic illness and how that affects our daily lives. Overall, Love from A to Z is just a great book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's on my favorites shelf, and I tell everyone that I know who likes YA contemporary novels to check out Love from A to Z if they haven't already, so definitely check that out if you guys want a good comfort read. The third and final comfort read I wanted to recommend to you guys is a book that I've mentioned a couple of times before on my channel, which is Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. This is another YA contemporary novel that follows our main character Darius, who's Iranian American and has always felt that he's never been able to truly connect to the Persian side of his family. He's also struggling with clinical depression, he's ostracized at school without any friends to call his own, and he also is dealing with a disapproving father with whom he can never truly connect with. One day he finds out that his grandfather is in ailing health, so him and his whole family take a trip to Iran for the first time, and there Darius begins to be able to connect back to his Persian roots and makes his first ever friend in a local neighborhood boy named Sarab. I think Darius the Great is Not Okay is an incredible book to read. It brought me to tears, which is unsurprising. I've mentioned this about all these other books as well, and I love the characters so much, and you guys know how much it means to me, and the last time I talked about this book I started crying in the middle of it, so definitely read Darius the Great is Not Okay. Amazing story, amazing book, highly recommend. All right, now let's move on to the third and final category, pain. The first book recommendation I have in the pain category is The Mountains Sing by Nguyen Phan Quy Mai. This is a historical fiction novel that follows the Jung family for multiple generations in Vietnam from I think the 1930s to the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. It follows them through great Vietnamese historical events like the Great Land Reform, the Great Hunger, and the Vietnam War. This is an incredibly moving novel, and I think really important, especially this is Nguyen Phan Quy Mai's first novel in English, and I think a lot of the Vietnam War novels that we have in the United States depict Vietnam from a very Western perspective through American characters, and I think it's important that we start to hear stories about Vietnam from actual Vietnamese authors and Vietnamese voices. I really think this is a great book to read. The characters are so vivid and so alive, and a lot of the events depicted in the novel are based off of real stories that Nguyen Phan Quy Mai found out about through interviewing refugees and diaspora people and people living in Vietnam currently. So incredibly important read in a historical sense, and also an incredibly moving read just from an enjoyment point of view. So something I highly recommend if you want to have a good cry. It's also on the shorter side, and the audiobook is very good as well if you want to hear the correct Vietnamese pronunciations for everything. So 10 out of 10, read it now, buy it now, cry about it now. The second recommendation I have for the pain category should be A Surprise to Nobody. It is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a historical fantasy novel that's based a lot on the Second Sino-Japanese War. It follows our main character Rin, an impoverished war orphan who decides she wants to get out of her town in the south of Nikon by taking the academic test that will place her into the top military academy in the country. She aces the test and ends up at Sinagard, which is, as I mentioned before, the top military academy in all of Nikon. There she meets a lot of other students who discriminate against her due to the color of her skin, her poverty, and her gender. She then finds out through the help of one of her teachers that she can actually access an unearthly power and gain power from ancient gods. One day, a neighboring country invades Nikon and the whole country falls into war. That is when Rin discovers that her powers are now no longer just necessary to pass school, but are now maybe necessary to save her entire country. This novel, oh, what can I say about it? Oh my gosh. Pain, just pain. Very interesting characters. I love that I finally have a novel with a female anti-hero. I think a lot of the times mainstream media doesn't give space for female characters to be as complex as male characters are, and so I love reading fantasies written by women because the depictions of women, the character development for female characters is so incredible, and I love seeing Rin, whether you love her or hate her as a character, develop so much. It just, what can I say? I also really appreciate the historical references. A lot of people don't know about the atrocities that the Japanese committed in the 20th century, not just in China, but all across Asia. So I think from a historical perspective, this novel is also incredibly important. But my God, this fantasy world is one you get sucked into so quickly, and then you are just in pain from book 1 all the way to the end of the trilogy. There is no reprieve for anybody at any time for any reason. So if that's something you're looking for, if you are a masochist, definitely read the Poppy Board trilogy. The final book recommendation I have today, and the third and final book recommendation I have in the pain category specifically, is The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. How do I even begin to describe this novel? It is, I would classify it as historical fantasy, or maybe just urban fantasy, I don't even know, but it's set in 1890s Paris, and it follows a very, very rich cast of characters. First is Severin, a French Algerian hotelier, Enrique, who's a Spanish Filipino historian, Zofia, a Jewish Polish mathematician, Lyla, an Indian dancer, and Tristan, a botanic specialist. This group of friends has been hired on to be part of a heist to steal an item of great magical importance. I'm trying to describe this in the most basic terms as possible because if you haven't read the novel, I think it's pretty difficult to understand what everything means because there's a lot of in-world terminology that makes it hard for me to explain it without going into explain further details, if that makes sense. So they're hired to pull off a heist where they steal a magical item that is so important that it could restore Severin, the first character that I mentioned, back to his true place of power and restore his inheritance. This novel is so rich in detail that I think it's not for the average reader who just wants like a fast-paced fantasy to get through. This is for the reader that wants rich world building, great historical references. This book discusses so much about anti-colonialism and fetishization of cultures and how Western Europe had stolen so much from countries that it colonized. The criticism of imperialism is amazing. I think these characters, all the characters bring so much to the novel and to the story, and I love multi-POV fantasy novels, so this is just a great book to check out if you want to really deep dive into a really rich story with great world building, because The Gilded Wolves is so many people's favorite fantasy series, and I can totally understand why. I don't know how to describe it besides saying that it's rich. Like it's so detailed and so wonderful, and it's something I highly recommend. What is happening outside right now? It is a book I highly recommend to anyone who wants to deep dive into something, into a world that they can just get lost in. And also pain. Also pain. That is all I have to say about The Gilded Wolves. Check that out if you're interested. Before we say goodbye for the day, let's go ahead and take a quick second to talk about today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you guys haven't heard of them before, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of different types of classes for all types of creatives. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, or just get lost in your creativity. There are all types of different classes that you can learn from. There's lifestyle, productivity, plant care, web development, entrepreneurship, illustration, portrait photography, digital photography, graphic design, anything artistic that you might want to learn about, Skillshare will have a class for you. One of the classes that I've been really interested in lately is Plants at Home, Uplift Your Spirit and Your Space by Christopher Griffin, aka @PlantQueen. This class has been so fun. There's such a great instructor, and I feel like I've learned a lot about caring for plants, and not just how to like help with root rot or how to repot plants, but how having greenery in your space can really help with your mental health as well, and how caring for the plants can, and incorporating that into your routine can, I don't know, just soothe the soul. And I highly suggest you guys check out that course if you have a chance. Skillshare is a space that's also curated specifically for learning, meaning that there are never any advertisements, and they're always launching new premium classes. That way you guys can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. If you guys are interested, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link below in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership to explore your creativity. Thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and definitely check out the link below if you're interested. And that is all for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys pick up one of my recommendations. Let me know how you like it if you do pick one up, and if you have already read some of these books, let me know down below if you enjoyed them, how you felt, did I pick a good category to place them in, etc., etc. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!